The email notification pinged on my laptop at 2:47 a.m. Another urgent request from a client in Hong Kong who needed their fabric samples expedited. I rubbed my burning eyes and reached for my fourth cup of coffee of the night, the bitter taste mixing with the exhaustion that had become my constant companion. Through the office window, I could see the empty parking lot bathed in orange streetlight. Even the janitor had gone home hours ago. But here I was, Alexandra Novak, 25 years old with a master's degree in international business, pulling another all-nighter at my family's textile import company while my younger brother Dylan was probably passed out in some Miami nightclub, his $150,000 CEO salary funding another weekend of luxury I could only dream of. The irony burned worse than the coffee. While I managed every aspect of operations, from supplier negotiations in 3 different languages to crisis management at 3 a.m., Dylan's most challenging decision was choosing which restaurant to take clients to for his business lunches that lasted until 5 p.m. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Bro, just closed the Peterson deal. Drinks are on me." Below was a selfie of him grinning with a martini, surrounded by laughing executives at what looked like a 5-star rooftop bar. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. The Peterson deal that I had researched, priced, and negotiated for 3 months. The same deal where I've flown to Chicago twice on my own dime because travel expenses need to be approved by the CEO, and Dylan was too busy with his girlfriend's art gallery opening to sign off on company funds. But according to my parents, Dmitry and Elena Novak, this was just how family businesses work. Dylan had the natural leadership qualities and business instincts that made him perfect for the CEO role, while I was better suited for supporting the vision, code for doing all the actual work while he took all the credit. "It's your duty as the eldest daughter," Mom would say whenever I dared to question the arrangement. "Family comes before personal ambition. Your grandfather built this business from nothing so that his children and grandchildren could prosper together." Prosper together. The phrase made me sick. Dylan was certainly prospering. The BMW in the garage, penthouse apartment downtown, vacation photos from Santorini and Aspen cluttering his Instagram. Meanwhile, I was surviving on ramen noodles and splitting rent on a studio apartment with a roommate because 70 hours a week of unpaid labor doesn't exactly build a savings account. The breaking point had been building for months, but it crystallized that Tuesday morning when I overheard Dylan on a conference call with our accountant. "Yeah, just keep paying my salary as usual," he laughed, "and make sure to categorize those Miami trip expenses as business development. Alexandra handles all the operational stuff anyway, so I need to focus on networking and deals." The accountant's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "And what about Alexandra's compensation? I don't see any payroll entries for her." "Oh, she doesn't need a salary, she's family. Plus she's learning so much about the business. That's worth more than money, right?" They both chuckled like it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. I stood frozen in the hallway, a stack of shipping manifests clutched in my trembling hands. 3 years. 3 years of sacrificing my career, my social life, my financial future, while my little brother treated our family's legacy like his personal piggy bank. That afternoon, I did something I should have done months earlier. I called a labor attorney. Jennifer Walsh's office was in a sleek downtown building, all glass and steel that screamed competence and success. She listened to my story without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad while I laid out 3 years of documentation I'd been unconsciously collecting. "The good news is you have excellent records," she said, reviewing printouts of emails, work schedules, and financial documents. "Bank records showing the business's profitability, evidence of your contributions, clear documentation of the disparity in treatment. This is actually a stronger case than most family business disputes I see." "But they're going to claim I'm just a volunteer helping out family," I said. "That's what they always say when I bring up payment." Jennifer smiled grimly. "Family businesses aren't exempt from labor laws. If you're performing regular work that directly benefits a for-profit enterprise, you're entitled to compensation regardless of your relationship to the owners. The Department of Labor takes these cases very seriously, especially when there's clear gender discrimination involved." Gender discrimination. The words hung in the air like a bell that couldn't be unrung. "Your brother gets paid $150,000 for part-time work while you work full-time for nothing," Jennifer continued. "That's textbook discriminatory practice. The fact that he's male and younger makes it even more obvious. She referred me to Sandra Martinez at the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division. File a complaint first, Jennifer advised. Let the DOL investigate and document everything officially. If they find violations, which they will, you'll have a much stronger position for any follow-up action. The complaint form was surprisingly simple. Basic information about the business, my role, hours worked, and compensation received. 0. But Sandra wanted documentation, and after 3 years of basically running the company, I had plenty. Email threads showing me handling everything from customer service to supplier crisis, work schedules proving my 70-hour weeks, financial records I had access to as the person who basically managed the books, meeting minutes where my contributions were discussed but never compensated. The most damning evidence was a board meeting recording from 6 months earlier, where Dad had explicitly told the other investors that my unpaid work was saving the company at least $200,000 annually in management salaries. While Sandra conducted her investigation, the atmosphere at home became increasingly toxic. I'd started setting boundaries, leaving at 8 p.m. instead of midnight, refusing to answer emails on Sundays. Push back on Dallin's assumption that I'd drop everything for his latest crisis. "You're not being a team player," Dad lectured during one particularly heated family dinner. "This business only works when everyone contributes equally." "I am contributing equally," I shot back. "More than equally. The difference is Dylan gets paid for his contributions. Dylan has different responsibilities. He's building relationships, securing deals. With research and groundwork that I provide. Dylan couldn't find Hong Kong on a map before I started preparing his client briefs." Mom jumped in with her usual guilt tactics. "Family loyalty used to mean something. Your grandmother worked alongside your grandfather for 40 years and never asked for a penny. Grandmother also bought half the business when grandfather died. What exactly am I going to inherit here?" The question clearly caught them off guard. In all their lectures about family obligation and shared sacrifice, they'd never actually discussed what my equity stake would be, probably because they'd never intended for me to have one. Dylan, meanwhile, seemed genuinely confused by my growing resistance to his demands. He'd burst into my office with some new project or crisis, expecting me to drop everything and solve it immediately. "Why are you being so difficult lately?" he asked after I told him I couldn't stay late to fix a shipping issue he created by giving a client the wrong delivery date. "I'm not being difficult. I'm being professional. If you need someone to work overtime, you need to plan ahead and compensate them appropriately. Come on, Alex. We're family. Since when do you care about clocking hours?" "Since I realized I've been working full-time for 3 years without a single paycheck while you've collected over $400,000 in salary." He actually looked shocked, like the math had never occurred to him. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Sandra was thorough and professional, interviewing employees, reviewing financial records, and documenting every aspect of the business operations. Her preliminary findings were devastating for my parents. "Clear violations of the Fair Labor Standards Act," she explained during our phone call. "Based on your documented hours and responsibilities, they owe you at least $95,000 in back wages at minimum wage rates. But given your education and actual job functions, fair market compensation would be significantly higher." More interesting was what she discovered about the corporate structure. "Your parents listed you as a 10% shareholder when they incorporated, but there's no record of you ever receiving distributions. Either you're not actually a shareholder, which makes the filing fraudulent, or you are a shareholder and you're owed 3 years of profit distributions." The numbers were staggering. My share of company profits over 3 years should have been around $150,000. Combined with unpaid wages, the total approached $250,000. "What happens now?" I asked. "We can pursue wage violations through our standard process, or if you want to address the shareholder issues, we can refer this to other agencies for a broader investigation." I thought about Dylan's vacation photos, his casual assumption that I'd always be there to clean up his messes, my parents' lectures about family loyalty while they systematically exploited me. "Let's pursue everything," I said. The decision to quit wasn't dramatic, just a quiet recognition that I'd reached my limit. I spent a weekend writing my resignation letter and preparing transition documents for every project I managed. Despite everything, I didn't want to sabotage the business Dad had built from nothing. Monday morning, I walked into our weekly management meeting. Dad, Mom, Dylan, and me crammed into the conference room that still smelled like Dylan's breakfast sandwich. I slid copies of my resignation letter across the table. Effective Friday, I'll be transitioning out of my role here, I announced. The silence was deafening. Dad's face cycled through several colors. Mom's eyes immediately filled with tears. Dylan just stared at the paper like it was written in hieroglyphs. "This is ridiculous," Dad finally exploded. "You can't just quit. This is a family business. You have obligations. I've been fulfilling those obligations for 3 years without compensation. I've decided to accept a position elsewhere." This was optimistic. I had some promising interviews lined up, but nothing concrete yet. Still, my Northwestern MBA and 3 years of operational experience were apparently more valuable on the open market than in my own family. "Sweetheart," Mom pleaded, "we can discuss compensation. We never wanted you to feel undervalued." Why was this discussion necessary when Dylan started working here? The question hung in the air like smoke. Dylan shifted uncomfortably, probably realizing for the first time how the whole arrangement looked to an outsider. "Dylan is the CEO," Dad said weakly. "He has different responsibilities." "Yes, but I've been doing the work of a COO and CFO for 3 years. What's the market rate for those roles?" They couldn't answer because they'd never bothered to research it. In their minds, my labor was free because I was family. "Who's going to handle all your projects?" Dylan asked, panic creeping into his voice. "That's detailed in my transition documents. You'll need to hire at least 2 people to cover my responsibilities. I recommend starting the search immediately." What followed was hours of alternating bargaining and guilt trips, offers of profit sharing that should have been implemented years ago, promises of official titles that felt insulting in their lateness, reminders of family loyalty that ignored the fundamental inequality of the situation. I listened politely and declined everything. Not to be vindictive, but because I'd lost faith that they'd ever treat me as an equal rather than free labor with a genetic obligation to sacrifice. My last week was surreal. Word spread quickly among employees that I was leaving, and their reactions were both heartwarming and validating. These people had watched me work myself into the ground. They knew who really kept things running. "Miss Alex," our shipping manager Carlos said, "I don't know how this place gonna survive without you. You're the only one who understands how everything connects." He wasn't wrong. I built most of our systems from scratch, cultivated relationships with every key supplier, and developed the institutional knowledge that made daily operations possible. Friday afternoon, I cleaned out my desk and returned my access cards. Dad hadn't spoken to me all week. Mom alternated between weepy guilt trips and angry lectures about family betrayal. Dylan cornered me in the parking lot as I loaded boxes into my car. "Alex, this is insane. We're family. We work things out." "Family doesn't exploit family, Dylan. Nobody exploited you. You were getting incredible experience learning the business. You were getting experience too. The difference is you were also getting paid $150,000 a year for it." He had no response to that. The immediate aftermath was almost comical. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Monday morning, then every 20 minutes until noon. Panicked voices asking where files were located, how to handle various crises when I was coming back. I didn't answer any of them. The texts were more entertaining. Dylan begging me to just consult remotely until we figure this out. Mom sending guilt-laden essays about family obligations. Dad's single message: "This is selfish and immature." By Wednesday, Mom showed up at my apartment with tears and homemade baklava. "The whole business is falling apart," she sobbed. "Your father had to cancel the Morrison contract meeting because nobody knows how to prepare the presentation. Dylan can't access the supplier database. The warehouse is backed up because no one understands the shipping protocols you created." "Sounds like a management problem," I said gently. "They'll need to hire qualified people." "We can't afford to hire people right now." This was laughable. I'd seen the books. The business was profitable enough to pay Dylan 6 figures while maintaining substantial cash reserves. "Mom, I love you, but I'm not coming back." This situation was never sustainable. She left with her baklava untouched, muttering about ungrateful children. The Department of Labor case moved forward steadily. My parents hired an employment attorney who tried to argue that I was a volunteer motivated by family affection. The argument crumbled when Sandra presented evidence of my regular responsibilities, the business's dependence on my work, and the profit distributions that had mysteriously bypassed me. The case ultimately settled. The final number was $240,000. Less than my full calculation, but enough to make a statement. More importantly, the settlement required changes going forward. Any family members working for the business had to receive fair market compensation. Dylan's salary was restructured to reflect his actual contributions. New policies ensured proper shareholder distributions. I used part of the settlement to relocate to Seattle and accept a position with a tech company that had been courting me. The work was challenging but fairly compensated, and my experience managing operations for a family business turned out to be incredibly valuable. The family relationships were harder to repair. Dad never quite forgave me for airing private matters publicly. Mom gradually came around, especially after seeing how much happier I was. Dylan and I actually developed a better relationship once we weren't trapped in a toxic workplace dynamic. Ironically, the business improved once they were forced to operate professionally. With proper staffing and systems, they expanded into new markets and increased profitability. Dad grudgingly admitted that maybe it worked out, though he still insisted my methods were unnecessarily dramatic. 2 years later, Sandra called to ask if I'd speak to a Department of Labor training session about family business exploitation cases. Standing in front of a room full of investigators, I shared what I've learned. Document everything, not just for legal purposes, but for your own sanity. When people who claim to love you systematically devalue your contributions, it's easy to internalize their narrative. One investigator asked how I'd found the courage to pursue the case despite family pressure. I realized that real love doesn't require some family members to sacrifice everything so others can prosper, I said. If demanding fair treatment damages the relationship was already broken. The settlement money was nice, but the real victory was breaking a cycle that could have continued indefinitely. I'd shown my family, and myself, that love and loyalty don't require accepting exploitation. Sometimes the person who'll do your job after you quit isn't another family member willing to work for free. Sometimes it's a Department of Labor investigator with a calculator and a very different perspective on fair compensation. The business still operates today, more professionally managed and properly staffed. Dad still tells people I helped out for a while before pursuing other opportunities. I don't correct him anymore. The truth is in my career, my bank account, and the precedent set for future family members. Justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like a government investigator asking simple questions like, why is one child paid while the other works for free? Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to accept because we're family as an excuse for exploitation. That investigator, as it turned out, was worth every penny they didn't pay me.